Hello and welcome to another update to here Strand Designer version 1.261, where I've added a couple of new features to this tool, and I've also increased the price a little bit by popular demand, really, because it is selling quite well, and I figure if I put the price up it will justify the time put into it, as well as the overhead of dealing with a lot of customers at this point in time. So putting the price up is good all round, I think. So what I've added is these texture passes. You'll see that I've got the Rgb Mask, normal map, masking, the color map, ID maps for sets, depth map, ID map for strands, AO map, and I've also got kind of like a rainbow coloring thing in there. So I'm going to show you that. You can check out the video here, and I've also updated the documentation. So let's go ahead. I've just downloaded it here. Because when it was windowed and it exported the files, it had a tendency to come back and crash on you and give you an error, and the canvases would turn black. So that's now hopefully fixed with the full screen thing. I've moved the generate button up to the top here. Everything works with left click now. So it used to be right click would do one thing and left click would do another. So left click does what you want it. Everything's left click. That way, if you're using like a tablet or a laptop even, then you can just like tap the little navigation pad. Alright, so I'm going to enable all the maps and just do a generate just to show you what's here. I've got ID mode set to sets. So if I left click that, you see this little marker shows me this is the ID map. Also tells me down the bottom previewing ID map set based. Right, so it's gave each of these strands a unique color. So it uses up the RGB CMY white, then it will start to go into like other colors, so you can easily pick these colors out. Once I introduce the ability to add sets, so you can overlap them and things, it will generate new colors. There's a possibility that it might come up with colors too close, so what I've done is just predefined about 30 odd colors that are quite different from each other, kind of sub divisions of RGB that are quite distant, so that it's easy enough to select them. Okay, so I've added in a flow map. So if I just click here, so just left click, you'll see this is the flow map that I've worked out how to generate, but I've no idea if it's perfect yet. Now you can flip the X and see if it's more like what you expect and things like that. So I'll just disable these maps just to preview that. I want to show you this in detail. So flip X doesn't do much, it just changes the I think it's the red channel or something. Flip Y, do another generate, so it's up here now. So it gives you this green tone, and then flip X and Y. So I'm not sure if it's working exactly the way it should be. I'm just going to put the waviness way up so we can see that change. I've tried to follow a few papers on it, but you can see how it's got this dark green tone here and then this kind of orangey tone. So there's also like a value as it goes down the way getting added into this this effect, but I'm pretty sure it's what directional maps do. And there's also in some cases a blue map, a blue kind of overlay, and I've not got that working correctly just yet. So you see when I generate here, it's it's like kind of weird and white and things. So I've not got that working just yet, but as a compensation I've created this hue method, which I'd probably prefer to use in a shader, because you'll see that when I generate this, that it just creates a rainbow based on the direction. So you imagine like 360 degrees and it's a full rainbow, and as it moves to certain angles it's going to use certain colors. So in any sense you could sort of take this and get what you want from it. If anything's this kind of tone of orange, it's going straight down. If it's this tone of blue, then it's going this angle. This tone of green, it's that angle, and things like that. Again, I'm not sure if it's working perfectly because it looks like I might be kidding myself a bit, but it's purely experimental. I've not really done much in the way of flow maps or had to use them. For me, they're just kind of a bit icing on the cake. But depending on your workflow, I think normally once you've got your hair cards in place on your character, you could, I guess you could bake some kind of world space from that using the current normal map on it in world space, kind of like in a baker. That's possibly how I would go about it, but otherwise you kind of stuck with what I've gave you here for the flow map until I get some feedback. So I've also generated the Ambient Occlusion Map. I just need to generate these again. The Ambient Occlusion Map is just, it draws the hairs a few times in different levels of intensity. Just to change the set distance there. Okay, I'll just generate it again so you can see it a bit better. And this will work on a per set basis. So if you overlap these sets, it's not going to, in fact it will overlap from right to left. So this, it draws these hairs first, one by one, and then it will draw these ones, and then these ones. So I guess if they did overlap, let me just try it, just to see what we get. Just turn these off, just to save a bit of time. Generate. I mean, it's quite quick anyway. It's quick on like a desktop PC. It can be a little bit slow on a laptop, but it does look like everything's getting overlapped a bit. So you can preview the Rgb Mask here, and you can see how that would work together. Rgb Mask, as you know, does the variation in the red channel, the root in the green channel, and the tip in the blue channel. I'm going to give a little bit more control of the sizing of the strands. So you got this minimum scale and maximum scale. I'll just ramp this up so you can see what I'm talking about. Right, so it starts at its smallest scale, which is this value, and then as it gets to its the midpoint, that's the thickest value, which is like 35. I'm not sure if it's not exactly pixels, it's more like a kind of generic value or a percentage. Then it gets to the 0 point again, but I want to be able to control where that happens. You know, that this is this scale fade in and fade out %, so I'm going to introduce this. It could easily be confused with this root scale and tip scale, but these actually control the amount of the color coming in. So I can see that could be confusing only now. I'm like, okay, that's what I would think that does, because it's part of the whole kind of algorithm here, and maybe color's a separate thing. So I might even bring root tone in and then have that like a slider here that says color scale or coverage. Maybe it's a good one. Tip tone and coverage. That might be good, and then that way I can basically change these to root size or whatever it might be for the, you know, the increasing of the size of the little strand here. You know, how far does it go before it gets to a certain thickness. So that's really that. Let me just check the EO. EO looks quite nice with the big strands. It's a little bit noisy, I guess. You could always like clean this up, do a little bit of blur in Photoshop. I guess anything that this creates is subject to a little bit of post-process, just because of the way that it's made is kind of haphazard, but it all depends on what you're trying to make. I'm going to just do some tapering here, variation. Just want to see what I can get. I'll enable the color. Let's just enable everything. I want to show you everything here. So in theory you could generate a bunch of strands like this, just like big bunches with a lot of tapering. I'll taper those in more, distance them, and then when you're in Photoshop you can sort of overlap them and make your own sort of sheet from it. So there we go, there's a whole bunch of different sort of clumps there, and when I introduce the the new feature of adding sets, then you just create a set, give it its values, create a new set, so on and so forth, instead of this generic 8 sets that you're stuck to, and then you've got these, you know, globalized numbers. So there'll be like a global and global value that does this. Then there'll be like the set based override, so you'd click on a set, then you could override the values. It would say like set active number 0, right? And then you could override the values just for that set. Not sure how it's going to work just yet. It might mean a UI redesign or something, but you can see I'm already starting to shift things around, tighten things up, and I'm kind of all these extra buttons and things. Right, so back to what I was talking about. I just want to change a few things here. I'm going to change some of the lengths. 1200, and I guess a couple of flyaways. So I'll do a 1 and a 1. Let's do 3 there. 5, 10, 20, and 20. Right, so I've got 65 strands ready to get generated. Generate those. I might want to bring the sets in closer. Okay, let's look at the color map. So it's all left click now. You'd be tempted to right click if you've been using this for a while. Right click won't do anything. So I've taken away right click completely, just because, you know, right click's more of a kind of second menu thing, and I might have to use that. Right, strands are quite thick, so I'm just going to generate again. Okay, that's a little bit better. The colours are obviously unrealistic, so I can go ahead and change those. So generate again. Anytime you make a change to anything, you'll have to regenerate it. Sometimes it will give you a warning up here. I've got a little bit of a bug, and I don't know if it's a feature. It's when the strands are so short that it will use the tip tone quite heavily. I mean, you could get around it by reducing the tip scale, and this is where it'll be good when I bring in the sets or the set control. Maybe I can do that first, like set control overrides to when you click on a set somehow, maybe through a different menu, like a hierarchy, then you can change settings per set, and you can change the tip scale just to affect each one, because the algorithm internally is getting a bit mixed up about the length of the hairs, and that's something I can fix. So if I change that, you can see it's a little bit better, but it's got a little bit of the root coming through, variation here and tip, and I think it's just it's squeezing everything down into this set, but the tip's obviously getting a little bit more domination because it's the last thing that happens. So that's a little problem when you make your strands too short. So it might be better to generate longer strands and then resize them, but yeah, ideally I fix it at my end. So we've got the AO map, flow map, you can see here. That flow map looks brighter to me. I think potentially I'm not clearing it. I have no idea. Maybe it just looks that way to me. I'll put it up again in a second, but there might be something broken there. Depth map, ID map, so you can switch on strand mode. It's going to turn off this randomization. Now you can see it's done each strand as its own ID, but it only uses 6 colours, whereas with the set mode it will use as many sets as there is. And there might be a maximum on that later. So there's the mask map and the normal map. The normal map cheats a little bit. It just draws a texture that's got the left and right fall off, so the red channel is added to the right and subtracted to the left. It doesn't do any green channel stuff. It just doesn't need it because it's assuming these are on, you know, flat cards that you then bend round. You could, if you want, when you bring this into Photoshop, go into the green channel and kind of just add some generic gradient to the green, but it's entirely up to you, and then depending on what engine it's for, you can go green up or green down. So there's these little things that are easy enough to add in, and I could potentially add them in at some point as well. So you get your mask here, which I've spoke about, and let's do the set distance back to normal. If we increase the strands here, it won't take any effect if these are all overridden. So if I need to change these back to 0 to get the effect of those global values here. So I don't want to make it too complicated, but it's nice. It's nice as a startup. Then you would override these when you click on the strand set. You can, you know, override the actual strands. So instead of this generic slider, that's good to get started, and it'll be some sort of global mode. I might have a switch that's like global and local, or global and set based. So we'll see how I'm going to work the UI, and it's going to be a while before I develop that because I'm supposed to be starting contract fairly soon. Right, I think there we go. So it's generated these clumps. Let's increase the distancing and bring the scale down a bit. Let's get more strands. I've capped the number of strands to 100 now because basically 500 was way too much and it was crashing. Instead of calculating things each time, it just stores everything in the first pass. So it's pretty good. You can see it kind of bunches up here at the end. That's just because the tapering's too high. You can increase the distancing a bit as well to avoid that. Okay, and flow map. Yeah, it definitely seems to be getting more and more saturated. Could be wrong, maybe it's the waviness. Let's try and increase that, and let's just turn that back to 0. I'm just going to check this, and then that'll be the end of the video. That looks alright. Looks alright. I'll generate again. Just want to see if it's overlapping. It can easily happen, where I might not be clearing it internally, but yeah, that looks the same. Okay, so everything's good. This is version 1.261. The price just got increased a little bit. And the next feature I'll be working on is I'll probably correct the flow maps, the way these work, because I'm not entirely sure that I'm doing it the right way until people test it. As I say, I put this Hue version in temporarily to see if people like that kind of system, but it also doesn't look like it's correct because this is flowing that way and it's got that blue, and this is going this way and it's got that blue, so I'm not doing something right. So that looks like it needs tweaked as well, but this looks quite cool for something else like a specularity or some kind of frizziness, and I'll probably utilize that in the future to help drive the frizz map. but you can go ahead and use it. You know, you can generate the strands and then just, you know, take away something like change a bit of variation and then mix them in or something like that. That'd be cool. Alright, so thanks for watching. Well, that's the other flow modes that I showed you at the start. Right, thanks for watching the video. Get in touch if you need any help with anything. If things aren't working right, or you want to point, you know, correct me with any of these maps, or, you know, just complain in general about life and things, just, yeah, why not? Alright, feel free to comment in the video or get in touch through ArtStation or by email. I will be busy from next week because I've got a bit of a contract coming up, and it might, you know, slow down the whole process of this, hence why I've kind of rushed out the flow map and the AO map, and they might not be like fully finished yet, but still beta version, still relatively cheap, and your support's really been helpful to me, so thanks again for encouraging me to keep on at this, and I'll keep developing it. I'm going to be working on some different strand algorithms, so it's not just this kind of sine wave thing. I'll be working on some kind of irregularity type setups that some of the strands can follow, and some flyaways added to that. So there'll be a percent of kind of like freak or flyaway hairs that you can add to each bunch, and obviously the set things, control points where you can sort of click a couple of points on your set and bend them round, which is going to be a massive challenge. The loading and saving projects is probably well overdue, but there's no point me doing this until I'm set about all the numbers, because all these algorithms and numbers I want to store eventually somehow, so I need to make sure these work right. Otherwise it'll be a lot of back and forward, come back and you know, the load and save setup and changing numbers. So once I've got everything solid, then I'll get the project up and going. But it spits out your maps. You can easily regenerate what you've got by taking a note of the numbers and this seed number. If you take a note of everything, then in theory it will just generate exactly the same thing. So a little screenshot, and you've got basically a file save in theory, right? Until I get to that point, I'll maybe just save out these numbers and make it convenient for you that way. Yep. So again, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next update. Bye.